All right, let's see who pops in here first. Renata is first, Kathleen is second. All right, fantastic. Welcome, everybody. So do you want me to make up the question of the day or you want to make it up?
You go right ahead.
All
You're
right.
much better than I am. You're much
So,
more creative.
question of the day was, first of all, where are you from? That's the first thing. Where are you from? And what was your favorite cartoon when you were a kid? There you go. No, we're not going to use it for phishing you later. Just saying.
So originally from a little town called Olean, which is south of Buffalo, New York. Tired of the snow, so now I'm down in Austin, melting away.
Exactly right.
Literally.
One for the other.
Yeah, nothing like 110 every single day.
Mm.
Favorite cartoons, I'm a Looney Tunes person. You know, I love the Tom and Jerry's, I love Bugs Bunny, and I love the Roadrunner.
Yeah, gotta love that. All right, so put it in the chat. That's how we're doing it. So Renata, Wile E. Coyote, love it. You must have a glutton for punishment with anvils coming down your head or something. So go ahead. So I'm gonna answer mine. Is that mine was actually the same as? I need to. Oh, that's a Q&A. I'm putting it in the wrong spot. Put it in. Where's the chat? There it is. Jeez, it's like the first time I ever done this. All right, so mine is I'm in Woodstock, Maryland. It's tight.
Dave, question of the day is where are you from and what's your favorite cartoon, right?
That's right. When you were a kid. Boom. There it is. Question of the day, where are you from? What's your favorite cartoon? Mine's Woodstock, Maryland. Or Merlin. If you're from here, you know what I just did.
Maryland.
Merlin.
Baltimore.
Palmer, Maryland. Oh, by the way, I don't know if you guys even know this, but this right here, this is a DAT machine. And 30 years ago, this month, I released a song called Ball Moron. And that talking about how we talk here. So that's going to be re-released. So that's going to be earth-shattering for everybody here, I know. All right. So come on, guys, you can do this. It's all right. The question is, what's your favorite TV show? Not favorite TV, favorite, what did I say? Cartoon when you were a kid. All right. So Austin, Roadrunner, Bugs Bunny. We have me from Woodstock. And we have Southern California with Renata, Wile E. Coyote. Awesome. And then we'll get cooking in just a minute. I promise it'll be as painless as possible. So now where are you out of, Dan? Columbia, right?
So I'm out of Columbia, originally from Dalhart, Texas. And favorite is also Wile E. Coyote. Always pissed me off that he can never seem to win.
That's right, man. So I say you're glutton for punishment. I loved the Bugs Bunny and Wile E. Coyote. And what was the one with the sheepdog that always killed the coyote too? Is that the same thing? Remember the sheepdog?
Oh, that was the.
It's like Wile E. Coyote and a sheepdog would check in, you know, and then the job of Wile E. Coyote was try to get the sheep. And then the sheepdog would always pound them into oblivion. Anyway.
Oh, Felix.
Was that Foghorn Leghorn? The big rooster in that one?
Yeah, the dad dog and the little boy dog.
Yeah.
Is that what that is?
Lord, are we pulling them from the past?
I have no idea. Felix the
We're
cat,
showing our age, Dave.
That's right. Yeah. Notice we don't have anybody that's talking about that whatever the heck fish thing you were talking about earlier, Dan.
Hopefully I don't traumatize anybody when that comes.
That was great. So we'll get that. So we'll wait another couple of seconds. We got a bunch of folks here. It's fantastic. Glad you guys are here. The question of the day is, where are you from and what was your favorite cartoon when you were a kid? So we got a bunch of Looney Tunes. That's no shock. Just saying, just loony. Not necessarily saying that you're loony. Although if you fit the bill, the shoe fits. All right, cool. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to Killing the Phish. We're talking, and I'll tell you what, years ago, I don't know if you guys know this, I filled in for the Department of Transportation. It was a cybersecurity summit. And the gentleman that put that on, he had two of his folks cancel. And literally I said, look, if you're crazy enough to have somebody pinch hit, I'm crazy enough to pinch hit. And I got up and there's probably, I don't know, 30, 40 CISOs, a couple of CIOs in there and a bunch of different staffers in there. And the number one issue, I said, look, I'm a pinch hitter, so what do you want to talk about? And phishing was what they talked about. And this was 10 years ago. So it tells you how far we've come, ladies and gentlemen, is that we got to keep talking about killing the Phish. So welcome everybody. Glad that you guys decided to join us, specifically all the folks here. A lot of great agencies. We really appreciate everything you do. I was hoping somebody from NASA would be here because I got my, I need my space given the web things that are coming out. Really cool things there. So, but we appreciate you guys joining us. And we have the best briefing ever. Debbie says, from the SEC, I really learned how to kill phishing immediately. I think we'll talk about that, right, Daniel?
That's right.
There we go. And Sharon from the VA. It's a requirement for all leadership in VA. Boy, wouldn't we love to have that, right, Stephanie?
Yes.
We would.
Yes.
And let's see, from Department of Transportation, briefed in layman's terms. I know exactly what you mean. David, it's concise yet thorough. So there you go. Has to be concise and thorough. Cecilia, commonly occurring phishing attempts via both text and email were addressed. We'll talk about some of that, right? And more on their own as versus IT and the VA. That's okay, because guess what? We're going to talk about one of the errors and coming up that creates the problem. Donna at the VA, I understand what my role is and what is expected of me. I always love that. And Sharon from the VA, we can apply knowledge acquired immediately. Hopefully you can. And Cecilia is asking for please address, how can I ensure that I'm not tricked by pseudo sites mimicking UPS, FedEx, PayPal around orders and packages? Wow, that's a big deal, especially around Christmas time. I know that's an issue. Marcus from DHS, how we can get agencies to communicate threats and actual attacks faster. That's a big problem, right, Daniel?
It absolutely is.
It really is. And Tim from VA, how automation can stop the spread of malicious code. I believe we're going to talk a little bit about that for sure, right, Stephanie?
Absolutely.
And then Terry from USDA, reporting protocol of suspected phishing. That's a great question. I don't know, is there a protocol? I know that it depends on your agency how things work a lot of times, right? So real quick for the folks that you'll have these session docs, you'll have a link to this so that you can download the presentation, the capability statements, text sheets, kill chain example, and supplemental resources, of course, so that we can continue the conversation if needed. Briefing controls if you lived under a rock and you have no idea where you are. This is the first Zoom you've ever been in. Can't imagine that could possibly be the case, but you can go up top there and select side by side and make it look exactly the way that you want. And if you'd like to participate, it is simple. For the docs, we're going to put those in the chat. And for questions and answers, we're going to do that by raising hands and Q&A because we got 30 folks here. So we want to keep it organized as possible. And if you have something that you don't want everybody and their mother to see, send it to smiller@btechnologyinc.com or give her a call right there. And we'll make sure that you have that information as we go through this as well. Quick disclaimer, you're not going to believe this, Stephanie, but it's not affiliated or endorsed by GSA or any agency. And participation by everybody here, in order so that you can participate, it's not an endorsement or commitment to purchase from any vendor. So there you go. And with that in mind, let's see where everybody is. Why did you guys decide to join us today? Are you trying to get your head around how phishing works? Because we're going to talk about that. Or you're on the hot seat for cyber protection. You want to know how to solve your cyber issues faster. We're going to talk about that. I have a cyber issue right now, or my boss made me come. There has to be a Weisenheimer in here, and you can choose as many as you want. See that? We have at least one Weisenheimer. All right. So while we're doing that, we'll talk about what we're talking about today, and we're gonna give you an idea who these folks are and why they decided to join us to be able to help with the phishing side of things with the introductions. Topical overview is easy. We're talking about phishing and what we can do to help kill those fish quick as possible, and what are kill chains and empowering your organization to do that, and questions and answers and closing remarks, and making sure that we get you what you need as you get out of here. So a little bit about B Technology. Tell us about you, Stephanie Miller, out of Austin, Texas, where
Melting
you're
here in Austin.
blazing right now, right?
Yes, we are melting in Austin. Even our lakes are starting to dry up. I've been working within DoD and the federal government for about 25 years, doing IT and cybersecurity. Started my own company a few years ago. Just really wanted to get back to helping my employees and customers and really focusing on the mission and really digging into cybersecurity, and started working with CoLab. And I'll let you, Daniel, pipe in on what CoLab does.
Super. Go ahead, Daniel. Tell
All
us
right,
about
thank
CoLab.
you. So Dan Young, CEO of CoLab Technologies, and partnered with Stephanie Miller and also Dave Lowe and company.
Yeah.
I'm very happy to be here to talk about our platform, but more specifically about phishing and how we can help you guys with both detecting phishing from a human perspective and then automate a lot of that back-end hard work to make it really simple to go after and nuke the fish, right? And then get rid of them. But the CoLab platform is a distributed data analysis platform, so providing you a single scope of access, and we'll get into that a little bit. But it's more about the concepts behind it and why, if you're there's other products out there that do something very similar to CoLab. So just happy to talk about the concepts today and why we need to have this data fusion and the approach that we have towards eliminating phishing.
Love it, love it. And that is the topical overview of what it is and what it's not. So let's talk a little bit about this. By the way, this is my first introduction to this video that that Dan had put on here. Tell us about this Phish thing. What is this called?
So that's if anybody on this call has any children that's, I don't know, sub 10, maybe 11 years old, they probably have heard the Phishing on Me song. Well, welcome to my hell. This song gets played in my house more often than I'd want. So if you want a way to annoy your neighbors or know everybody at a party, Google Phishing on Me. I promise you it's not a phishing Rickroll, but it is a Rickroll of another kind. So enjoy going for that and annoying yourself for the rest of the day.
Yeah, it's already stuck in my head. I had to Google it, and it's one of those earworms for sure.
But it's a great segue into phishing, right? Because phishing is super annoying to all of us. It's one of those buggy things that won't go away. And no matter how many times I wish my filters and, Office 365 or Google G Suite or whatever else you're using would catch it, they don't. They do catch a big bulk of them and get rid of them. But the reality is, right, that we're still being nonstop hounded by these phishing attacks.
Well,
go ahead, Dave.
The main thing, and I got sprung on this too. Have you ever heard of a picnic error?
A picnic error?
A picnic error. Yeah.
It's like a boo-boo and
it's a picnic error. So anybody know what a picnic error is? So you can put that into the chat too if you know what it is, because this got sprung on me in another briefing the other day, and it's kind of like an ID 10T error. By the way, everybody know what an ID 10T error is? This is my favorite. So an ID 10T error is an ID. So you have to write this down. So you got to make this bigger. So watch this. You do ID, the number 10, and the letter T, and there you have your ID 10T error. So it's kind of like that. Anybody know what a picnic error is?
So Susan just helped us out with it.
What is it?
Problem in chair, not in computer.
Exactly. And that's what phishing is almost all the time, is that anytime you're talking to CISOs, it's like, man, I could do anything I can, but man, oh man, I can't solve the problem between the ears. That's the problem. So
in cybersecurity speak, we call that a layer 8 issue. So there's the 7 layers on the network from your baseline cables that get run under the ground,
right on,
all the way up to layer 7, which is where it should stop. But they had to add another layer called layer 8, which is the keyboard layer. It's the person sitting behind the desk.
Right on.
So,
I love it. So,
if you wouldn't mind backing up one
Oh,
quick second on that
yep.
slide. Sorry there,
I'll
Dave.
back
We're
up.
gonna go. I wanted to touch a couple things about phishing. So everybody's on the same panel or the same page here as we go through this. So phishing is essentially the leveraging of communication technologies. It could be email addresses, or it could be used text messages or some other form of said products like social media platforms to be able to go in and spoof somebody into thinking that you're a legitimate inquirer for information that they're going to ask from you, and invariably they're asking for credentials and so forth. In the last 5 to 6 years, there's been a significant improvement in the technical and also linguistic capability of these spoofers, of these phishers. Before, you know, it used to be from my uncle in Nigeria needs this money because of XYZ reason, and now it's legit. Hey, I'm from the IT services team. Please click on this for your monthly security briefing. So they're even masquerading as security folks within your organization, your team. One of the really important things about this is, and this is, I mean, you probably heard this all along, the most effective preventative measure against phishing is the human in between the keyboard and the screen, right? So the best way that you can protect yourself and your organization is by being better educated, so educating your team. But that is obviously only as if that was the case and it was easy to do it that way and just educate all the humans and nothing, you know, we wouldn't have any phishing attacks. Well, we wouldn't be sitting here today. And the reality is that it's just really easy to get duped and spoofed or phished, right, into clicking on something that you believe to be legitimate. And the reason is because we're all busy, we're running about our lives doing the things that we have to do, right? But real quick here is that the goal from the phisher is to steal credentials. And so what that essentially means is you need to be on the lookout for people asking you to input your password, your email address, and your, you know, biographical data or anything like that. Because what they could be doing is not even going after you. They could be asking you information about biographical information about yourself to masquerade as you as they attack somebody else in the organization. So the difference between what phishing is not, it's not spear phishing. So those two terms get a little bit mixed up, and I wanted to highlight the difference here. Phishing is when you broadcast, you know, you do a broadside attack at an organization or a group of people, hoping that somebody will land and then, you know, click on the link and then you can get in that way. Spear phishing is a targeted phishing attack. It's the inverse of broad. It's very focused, where you're going after, for example, if you want to go after ISI Federal or B Technology, you target specifically Stephanie or you target Dave Lowe. And those are very effective attacks. And the spear phishing attacks that they were running used to be really hard for them to do. That has changed with things like LinkedIn. So this is another area where you can be vigilant and aware. Watch out with your LinkedIn profiles. And if you manage a company profile, be very careful what information gets put in there, because if, for example, you're broadcasting your email address to the world, well, number one, you just gave, especially if it's your business email address, anybody going to, for example, colab.com, they can say, oh, daniel.young@colab.com is how those are structured. And then they just say, oh, here's the entire list of all the employees affiliated with that company. Guess what I can do? Frederick.Alstromer, and everybody else down the line, and create a bulk list and then start targeting those attacks at them. So being mindful of what you put out there and how you look at things. But again, the reality is that there's this is the federal government's estimate that there's 400,000 new phishing sites created each month. That's almost 500,000 new sites created per month. That's a ridiculous number of spoofing websites that come up. And it means it's impossible for us to take them down. And it's also impossible for everybody to be aware of what all of those are at any given point in time. They're masquerading as benign websites. Google, PayPal, and Apple are the most commonly referenced links that you'll see. It might look like a google.com address, and it might be appropriate, and you click on it thinking you're okay. One of the things, the fun facts though about phishing is that most of their life cycles before they get taken down is 15 hours. So if you are somebody who is compromised in a phishing attack, congratulations, you are one of X amount of people within a very narrow window of time that was compromised in that phishing endeavor. Simply because right now we've gotten pretty good at eliminating and detecting and updating our email policies, and to block against a lot of those phishing attacks. A person asked on the intro, how can we detect and look at it? So right now I've only been focusing on the human side, right, and what we can do as humans. One of the things I'm going to put here in the chat message is a link, and that's a google.com, and I'm not phishing anybody, so it's a very safe, legit link. If you ever are in doubt about a URL, just go to that, maybe I have that saved as a favorite in my browser, and you can just dump any link and URL in there, and it's actually going to go out, and Google maintains a huge database on malicious sites and also benign sites, so it helps you do a cross check on that. So if you've ever gone to a site and you get that big red on your phone, that big red pop-up, if you use an Android, that says, hey, the site is potentially malicious, it's because it's on that registry. So
Very
just
cool, man.
yeah, so feel free to use that. Hopefully that helps you all out. How is it detected? So now we're phasing back, away from the human element and into how do we detect phishing. There's a lot of really good companies out there that do offer phishing services or counter phishing services. Google offers it, Microsoft offers it through their email spam filters, and that's literally having that master registry list of new sites as they come up, as they're detected, and then updating that blacklist so that every time you send something there, it's going to get caught and blocked from even hitting your inbox. The problem is, though, when you have 400,000, 500,000 being created every month, it's impossible for those things to be 100% accurate. And that is why we still have some that slip through our email filters, our spam filters. And remember that 15-hour window, as soon as they get done with that first 15 hours, they're moving on to the next attack. They're creating a whole nother set of URLs and going after them. And that is why it's very important for organizations to have in place a solution to kill the phish and go after it. Dave, would you be so kind as to go to the next one?
I will be so kind to do that.
Thank you.
I'm gonna go ahead and ask the question of what you've experienced, because a lot of these actually can start with phishing, right? So hacks and all those types of things, but you got phish, hacks, ransomware, malware, denial of service. What have you experienced? And in that process, that was great, by the way. Thanks for that link. I didn't know about that. And that's awesome things that you can do right now. You can take that, give it to all your friends and everybody else.
Exactly.
Right? And by the way, the sophistication for phishing has gotten better, even the broad ones, and that's why they still work. If they didn't work, you wouldn't have 500,000 of them a month, right? There's a reason, and while the timeline is trimmed, they still do work, and the bad guys are getting bad things, right? Or bad guys are getting good things. All right, so go tell us about this piece, which is the killing the phish.
Yeah. And by the way, before we get to that, my sincere condolences to those who have experienced ransomware attacks. Hopefully they were not as damaging as it has been to some. We're going to actually get into how some phishing attacks led to ransomware in the same conversation. So stay tuned for how that's going to come through. The interesting thing here that we're talking about right now is how can you leverage technologies like a cyber kill chain? In our last podcast, our last webinar, we talked about that, how the cyber kill chain can help organizations, people, and systems, to include tools, understand better how the life cycle is when it comes to malware, ransomware, and all these other different types of malicious threat actor activities, right? From inception all the way through what it did in the system, and in the process, providing you the best way to remediate, extract, and prevent it from happening again. So the point here is that for effective nuking, right, or killing of a phish attack, once it's gone through your spam filters and once it's gone past that ID, I'll use the picnic word. Once it's gone past the picnic, right, it's gone through that filter too. Now you have a problem in your organization because somebody clicked on that URL. We're assuming that they provided the information, and either the attackers are taking the information they collected and gleaned from those people, and they're pivoting now towards a spear phishing attack, or that person was the intended target all along, and now they're using the information they gained from them. It could be, again, their credentials, it could be their biographical information or something like that. You'd be surprised how many people actually put their social security numbers into something that they got from an email. It's mind-blowing. But point being is that now they have the information they need to do the attack, and you can assume that immediately from the second they get that data. There's only have a 15-hour window. They're sitting on keyboard wherever they're sitting, and they're ready and they're going. And as soon as they see that, then they're launching that attack, right? So to be able to defend and remediate against this, you have to have a very proactive cybersecurity posture. That's also, it doesn't just mean tools, it also means the mindset of your SOC operations and your team of security specialists that work within your organization. But unfortunately, because again, going back to that 400,000 new phishing sites alone per month, and that doesn't include C2 nodes, so command and control nodes for all the malware, the ransomware, and everything else that they're pushing out to actually get on those systems, there is literally thousands, hundreds of thousands of data points per day that are being generated that they're going to need to be able to track, manage, and identify to be able to go after. And that's why there's really good companies out there like Mandiant, FireEye, and all these other big dogs that are putting out some really good threat intelligence information and also providing services to organizations, sometimes for a very pretty penny, to be able to go out and detect and remediate and block those attacks. We're here to talk about ways that you can do that without going to that level. And that level involves data, it involves processes, and it involves people. And that picture that you see here, that's talking within an organization, right? How within an organization, that's what you need. But then also needs a mindset of sharing collaboration outside of your organization. So if you're a big, large-scale organization that has, you know, a 1,000-member SOC team with a dedicated threat intelligence team, then you probably already have that covered internally to a large part. But if you don't have the luxury of all those resources, you're probably going to be wanting to look at technologies or capabilities that allow you to partner with others in your ecosystem, whether that's through ISACs, so information sharing analysis centers, or whether that's through direct partnerships if in your supply chain or in your partner network, if you're a .gov entity and something like that, where you can say, hey, let's create a formal sharing, private partnership, private, public, however that looks, where we can start pushing and sharing that data. And the reason that you want to start that is so that you can get to what those two pictures are on the screen. Dave, could you please go to the next slide?
You betcha.
And this is what you're seeing here is a sample kill chain for a Phish attack. And those, what you see on the screen right here looks very simplistic. It's like, oh, here's where the URL came from. Here's IP addresses it's beaconing out to. Here's the sources, those little lightning bolts. That's the sources that detected it as being malicious, right? And that we were able to neutralize and effectively block it. But for all those things to come together, what you're not seeing on the back end is literally hundreds of thousands of data points that are cross-checked and correlated in near real time to be able to get to an identification of something like that as soon as they see the activity within your network to block it. And then to generate what's in the white box is the IOCs, indicators of compromise, that you can then pass to either your partners or to systems, download it and put it into systems saying, hey, make sure you block this and this and this because of this validity that we've done on it, that we've checked and said this is actually malicious. Because the last thing you actually want to do is also block, I don't know, access to Microsoft.com or Google.com, because you could also have a whole other host of issues, right? So it has to be not just doing the work, but also doing the work in a very intelligent and guarded manner.
So let me make sure
Yes, sir.
I understand what you just said, because I think it was important. So somebody responds, clicks, and they get phished. The objective is to identify what exactly happened, run it through all the data points, and not negatively affect the network, is what I just heard. Because there's other areas that you still have to get to, and the better the phish, the more legitimate it looks, right? So the smarter the back end has to be able to keep all the rest of the systems running, because you don't want to take your systems down. That's the whole reason why you're doing this, right? You don't want your systems to go down, and you don't want anybody to be compromised.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, so to elaborate a little bit more, and from my perspective to kind of simplify this, those of you that check the box for ransomware, for example, someone gets a phishing attack and they click on a site, it didn't take them where they thought it went, and so they call the IT department, right? And we're all resource constrained in today's world. So we don't have 100 people in our security operations center. We don't have tons of resources. Our IT department takes a look at it, says, oh yeah, that's a phishing email. They delete all those emails off their network. They delete what they thought it led to. However, a lot of the boxes you're seeing on your screen were never identified. And this is what went down the pipe and triggered that ransomware, because you never got rid of that initial source that came in. You never were able to trace it all the way down because it's so resource intensive.
And is it also because of the amount of time, and you kind of alluded to this, Daniel, and that is that the amount of time it takes for the response also contributes to how deep that damage can go, right?
The time factor is definitely a part of it, but the what we call the obesity or the volume of the data is also a huge problem too, and that's what Stephanie was alluding to. So the mindset, and we're going to go into this in a case study, the traditional mindset is just delete the data, right, and get rid of it and move on with your day and wipe and do whatever. But like Stephanie just said, at the very bottom of the screen, you can see there's 5 different IP addresses. A lot of times you're only, the IT system guys are only going to see, or gals, right? They're only going to see one of those IP addresses. So, and then they block it in their firewall. If they don't have the proper automation mechanism in place to be able to find out all the different IP addresses that are associated exactly with a given attack and say, not just block this one, but block these other 4, now we have full coverage on that entire phishing attack. Maybe somebody else in the organization got a link that routed to a different one of these, or maybe with a different URL, right? But still routing to the same. So it's about having that full coverage on all those different data sources. And those come from different companies, different organizations, different teams. You know, some of it comes from the US federal government through US CERT, or open source community data information like phishing.co or others like that, Tor networks and everything else that are baked into this type of capability. And then you have attribution and naming information that you need to get. So who registered an IP address, or who purchased the IP address space, and who registered a domain on it, right? That's DNS records. And then be able to say, okay, wait a minute, in that same time frame, there's a great company that does this, WhoisXML API, and we actually provide their data feed through our platform, because WhoisXML API looks and it says, okay, phishing attack, boom, URL, phase 2, IP address. Okay, who is involved in creating those? Okay, this organization out here in, let's say, India, right? We'll just pick on them because it's easy. So in India, they created and registered this. Okay, well, what else did they do at the same time frame? Or who else, what other companies? Maybe it's a bunch of shell companies that are doing this, because remember, they are automated and they are working together in a coordinated fashion to be able to say at this same, you know, within a 5-minute window in that region of the country, what other domains came live. And you would not believe how many times we do exactly that cross check. And guess what? There's like 1,000 other one, or 999, because they went in bulk and registered 1,000 of them for this big phishing campaign that they're going to do. And then they just blast down to to all the people, that the folks that they're attacking. And as they get nullified, they just switch you to another one, another one, another one.
And so you're actually getting ahead of the curve in some instances. You're behind it a little bit because it just happened, but you're able to say, all right, well, there's another 900 of them.
Correct.
That look and smell like these fish over here.
That's exactly right. And with high confidence, we can say we need to take those suckers out, right?
Yeah.
So, but before we talk about the fun automated side, right, and how we're going to do that, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide, and we're going to get into a case study. So we're going to look at 2 different types of case studies, automated versus human bound. This first one is, and when I say human bound, I mean that this is mostly organizations relying on their IT staff to do what they are trained to do and what they can do best given the tools that they have in their disposition, right? And you can't fault it. So it'd be really hard to point fingers at somebody and say, oh my gosh, how did you guys miss this huge ransomware attack that came through this phishing? Well, you're only as good as the data that you have in cybersecurity, right?
Exactly.
So data and people, processes, and data are the 3 core things that have to go together and play very well for you to be effective in cybersecurity. And phishing is no exemption to that, right? It falls right in line with that. So a US company, we'll call them Victim A, right? They're a rather large manufacturing company. They're up in Connecticut. We assisted them with a phishing attack, and it cost them internally millions, and it cost their insurer millions as well. And the facts here about this attack was it was via email, check. So we already talking about that. So this threat actor launched this attack via email, and it targeted all users in the company domain space. Pretty small company surface when you actually look at their domain space and how many people have email addresses live and registered. And they were able to pull a lot of that information from LinkedIn. And the reason that we know that is because we saw the way that the emails were being constructed and the way that they're mentioning, you know, oh, your CTO, or they're talking about the chief of shipping and labeling and so on and so forth, that they were within the company. They're actually social engineering this attack through. But they got in and compromised 5 main accounts with their first phishing wave. And then those 5 accounts were then used to pivot and move laterally to different social engineer their way laterally until they got to the IT sys admins and then got in with them. Once they got into the core client data space, right, that's when they deployed their ransomware and basically held the company hostage. This is wash, rinse, and repeat what's happening across the globe to, you know, tens of thousands, probably different victims, from individual folks in their house all the way up to large scale multinational organizations, right?
Yep.
But it was only, the unfortunate thing is this was only encountered or uncovered when the system became fully encrypted and they went to go restart the server and it wouldn't boot because of, well, they couldn't load the data within the data stores because it was encrypted. So what did they have to do? That's remediation, right? So we have the incident facts. Now we understood what happened roughly. We're going to get to how we understood that as well. But remediation, what did the company need to do? Well, unfortunately, because they didn't have any backups other than what they had in on their data systems, and they had tier 1 and tier 2 locally, they thought they're okay. But because they were all governed by the same team person and all that, and there wasn't 2-factor authentication baked in place to make system changes, they were encrypted and they were forced to pay the ransom to remove the encryption. So the only way to get rid of the encryption for this organization was to actually barter and negotiate with the ransomware team and get that data. Now, of course, there's interaction with the FBI and local police in hopes of being able to recover some of that money. I wouldn't hold my breath on that. I could be shocked. You know, like you look at the Keystone Pipeline hack, or the Colonial Pipeline hack, actually, they were able to recover some of that money that was transferred to different banks, and they're able to recuperate some of that. But the reality is that most of the time, once that money is, you know, especially if it's crypto currency based, it's gone. But the one of the problems here that we had before they called us to come and help and remediate on this, the IT team wiped and did exactly what Stephanie was talking about. They wiped and reset all the suspected systems. Oh, just get rid of it, wipe it, get rid of it. In the process, they destroyed any log data that they may have had on their servers, for example, from simple things like who accessed what systems at what time and what user logged in, right? So they just went through and said, let's just go back to baseline, wipe everything, bite the bullet, endure the pain, and get ourselves back online. That was a big costly mistake on their part too, because if we would have been able to, we could have tailored in and limited the scope of our investigation. Number one, saving us time, which would have saved them money in remediation. So there's also another factor, cost factor here. It also would have helped us get to the systems before some of them were fully encrypted, to be like, oh wait, they moved laterally across this system to this system, let's get it and done. But that's old school thinking on the IT system admins at the time. We've had really good interactions with them and training, and hopefully on the next event, if it ever happens, they'll be able to better respond to it. But what are the outcomes? What happened from this, right? And that's where, obviously, I just was hitting on it. They implemented phishing training to all team members and IT staff. It's that picnic issue, right? So as long as we can address the picnic, and I'm glad I learned something in this webinar as well. That's awesome. I'm going to take that one and use it. But also it's about implementing data access controls in a much better way. So it's one thing to say, okay, yeah, here's my username and password. Oh, but you have to have 2-factor authentication. That's 2FA, right? If you don't have that, or some sort of like RSA token and something like that, it's much, much easier on the attacker space to get into these systems and nuke and wipe and ransomware and do everything else that they want to go in there with their nefarious little souls, right? So baking in some common sense practices as far as your authentication mechanisms goes a long way. And then of course, rolling backups of their data to an offsite storage, either offsite, a separate network, or better yet, why not put it in the cloud? I know that there's the government's making a big push for that, and honestly, it works really, really well. That's what my company does. Just make sure you read the T's and C's really fine. Make sure that you own your data and somebody else doesn't own it. They get the rights to go through it and all that other good stuff.
No way
nobody would do that. No. And then lastly, they implemented an automated kill chain. So they are actually, this forced them to take a holistic look at their cybersecurity footing and posture and realize that a large part of the blame was obviously on training of their IT staff and also their major personnel, but it was also on the ability that they had as an organization to pivot in this incredibly interconnected world, to look at data across disparate data sources and be able to manage and fuse that data together and make sense out of it, kill chains, reports, analysis, and make determinations on the fly. So that's where they're at today. The second one has a little bit of a better story, right? This was an international law firm out on the West Coast, victim B, and this phishing attack literally brought them to their knees. So a law firm, imagine if you're a law firm owner and your entire data base with all your client data and all your case files and all that gets in ransomware encrypted. What are you going to do? Right? You're going to pay, right? Or you're going to be calling somebody, you're going to be doing whatever the heck you can, because that is literally a death blow to a company like that. I mean, it's not just about, stealing the stored credit cards of your clients, like, happened with Visa and several others. We're like, okay, yeah, that sucks for the consumer, but for us, we didn't really lose money. In this case, these guys would have gone bankrupt. So again, threat actor leveraged phishing attack via email. This, unfortunately, was just a broadside phishing attack, no spear phishing involved, until they got the credentials for the admin team. Once they realized who they were talking to within the admin team, and this is where it gets a little bit sad because it was actually an intern in the admin team who was being paid. So this is the other thing in organizations we see a lot. You'll hire somebody very, very junior, give them the keys of the kingdom and tell them to go run the ship on the cybersecurity side of the house. That's not fair to the person you're putting in that situation, right? It's also not fair to the company and the organization because you're trusting your crown jewels to somebody who does not have the background experience to know what they're doing. But luckily, these folks did not hit the next clicker over remediation. They didn't go through and wipe. They triggered alarm on their SIEM, and that was because of the outbound data from one of the systems pinging the C2 node. So their rule sets was up to date. It triggered on a firewall, and that log caused a trigger in the SIEM. That young intern noticed it. It's like, wait a minute, why is this system beaconing out and doing this? Started doing a little research on it. Come to find out, yep, holy cow, we got a problem. And then their incident response team went into full-blown war mode and went and did kill chain analysis to identify patient 0, which happened to be, again, that intern's workstation. And they were able to identify by combining multiple threat intelligence, government, and partner data points together. So partners being other law firms in their ecosystem and the ISAC that they're a member of. Government, so they reached out to FBI and Leo because remember, you're talking about case data and some of these were federal cases, so they had to notify the authorities, which means that the authorities are like, hey, we better get in on this one too. And then thirdly, the threat intelligence sources. They were using Mandiant threat intelligence data combined with Who's XML API and combined with some dark web threat intelligence to be able to backtrack and say, who did this? Who stole our data? Who's ransomware it as well? Because not only did they ransomware it, but they took the data as well, right? And so they were able to identify data stores of their personal data, the case data that were actually on the dark web through a combination of, Intel 471 is the name of the company that we worked with on that as well. So it took 4 different threat intelligence companies, a system automation company like ours, which was Colab in that case, to be able to integrate and fuse all this data together with their SOC team to be able to identify this kill chain. And remember, we weren't just doing log analysis, looking dead box forensics at a laptop, pulling it apart, looking at the logs. We're taking a look at where did that IP go to? We were talking about that earlier on that DNS record resolution. That's how we were able to backtrack this entire case, because the SIEM flag said this system outbound here. Mandiant said, yes, that's known malicious. And oh, by the way, we believe it's this threat actor from this country and this organization. Look at that country organization, time frame, who registered what at that time, able to identify the scope of it. And then from there, identify the shell companies and then work with authorities to go backtrack that way. So known weakness and exploit was identified because of the connection with Mandiant and also the federal government. So they've been tracking this threat actor for a while. They knew the ransomware software that they were using. And because of that, we had a backdoor into their ransomware and we're able to decrypt all the encrypted stuff. So the outcome is very positive in this case. Dave, if you wouldn't mind clicking.
That is very cool. Just real quick. Now,
yeah,
you and I have had conversations that we can't have here about the kind of things that you've done with rabbit trails into areas that you would traditionally, including cyber currency, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where you think you can't really connect the dots, which isn't necessarily the case because of who you may or may not have worked for at one point in time. But these are the kind of really cool things to be able to say, all right, you're not, you're chasing rabbits. And I mean, you're chasing rabbits at crazy speeds when you're,
Right.
when you're talking about, and you're following
Millions of
all these
different data
trails.
points. Yeah.
Yeah.
Literally millions of data points you're having to cross-check and analyze and look at. And not only just cross-check and analyze and look at millions of different data points, those different data points are in different company systems. Some of it's in
Right
manual,
on.
some of it's in Who is XML API, right? Some of it's in the customer data space. And being able to have feelers that connect to all those, the spider web, right? And then pull and aggregate the data that you care about without overwhelming and overloading your ecosystem or your
Right.
team. That's what the platform like Colab is engineered and designed to do. And then, you know, so from there, Dave, we had the company went into remediation. Obviously, some training was involved in it for the IT, for the intern, and also for the rest of the company too. Their
Right.
onboarding practices. They now have an onboarding practice that involves phishing training that they should have been doing from the get-go, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then better data control, same as the other company. They should have had two-factor authentication in place. They didn't have that. Rolling backups, and then again, implementing and having at the tips of your fingers that phishing detection software combined with a platform like Colab and combined with the proper data sources of threat intelligence to get them to the point where next time when they get ransomware, they could possibly, very likely, be able to shut it off before the system even starts getting encrypted. Because if you can short circuit that detection time frame down to minutes from when it inception, you can cross check and go, holy cow, and do all this. Then you can actually go to start shutting off or disconnecting systems that the attackers would likely be going after. So if this system over here is getting encrypted, why don't we take everything else or take that offline and see until we have a grasp on what's happening. And then the cool thing here was that company was saved from going bankrupt. They literally were convinced that they were done. I know that the president of the company was, you know, and it's always sad to see a full-grown man in tears, unless they're tears of joy. And he was, yeah, he was in tears of joy.
Wow.
When they were able to decrypt it and get him back online. So,
And real
yeah.
quick, just talking about kind of the impact on the agencies that are here. You know, the bankruptcy thing, that's not part of it, but agency reputation is a huge deal.
Huge.
And the ability for you to have the trust of citizens, your constituents, the people, your customers, whoever you're served. This is a huge, huge deal. And we've seen it happen in different agencies. I won't say in the federal space, but certainly here in Baltimore, we had the situation with ransomware, and that started from the same catalyst came from a Phish, because that's how things happen a lot of times, because we as humans, we screw stuff up. That's what we do. We also do great things, but we screw stuff up. So
exactly.
And it's not against the intern, as you mentioned before, or anybody else on your team that you might have had a situation with in your agency, and policies and everything are in place, but mistakes do happen. And that's why being able to minimize the time from the time of inception, and then to this point, to your point, I didn't even know about this, the ability to be able to say, hey, this looks and smells like the Phish you had last time, so don't fry that fish this time. Right?
Exactly.
So
right.
that's the whole idea. Fantastic. I love it. All right.
So
What is this thing?
So this thing here is a very, hopefully informative. Please don't be overwhelmed by what you're seeing on here. There's only 3 real key points that you're going to be looking at here. And I'll walk you through a little bit of what you're seeing on the screen. But this is in essence all the different components that have to come together for any organization to effectively manage and go after and prosecute phishing attacks, spear phishing, ransomware, malware, denial of service, and so forth. It's all focused around data and the individuals looking at that data and how they're analyzing and crunching those data bits together, right, to get to that those analytic leaps or conclusions that they need to get to be able to respond effectively. On the left, you have that's data sources in, right? That details everything that an organization on a cybersecurity level is having to look at and manage, from historical data repositories. Dave was just talking about that. What happened before? Maybe an organization stores that in flat text files, reports, ticketing system. It could be in your Splunk. It could be Elasticsearch or wherever else that an organization stores that data, having that historical repository of being like, okay, we got attacked 5 months ago and it was from this organization. That same organization keeps hitting me. They just hit me again last week. We nullified it, but wait, why do we keep coming up on their radar? And then maybe looking at it and saying maybe there's some geopolitical angles or something else on the business intelligence side that makes sense for us to take a look at as a company and determine maybe it's because we have people with very lax security postures rocking and rolling around a part of the world where they maybe shouldn't be. We need to tighten down the ship there from a training and or policy standpoint, right? Same thing for external threat intelligence. We talked about Mandiant, who is XML API, Intel 471, RMS, and a bunch of other really good companies. That data, I know that it gets a bad rep in the cybersecurity world a lot of times, but you're only as good as the data you have. And you can't get to doing the work that a cybersecurity professional needs to do without having that weapon of data. There's a lot of freely available open source threat information. We provide that, again, free of charge also through our platform. It's called OpenCTI data. There's a lot of US cert, all the European certs put their data in there, but there's also a ton of Whois XML API and other data sources that they also just provide in there for the wide world to use. So an organization can, if they bake in that within their organization, they're going to get a big leg up on that as well, to where they can almost compete on the likes of like Anomaly or FireEye from a data standpoint. The security vendor data, that's also your SIEMs, your EDRs, your firewalls, your IPSs, your IDSs, all those, that salad acronym soup, right? That sounded really appetizing. That acronym soup that gets thrown out, those are all different vendors, products that organizations purchase and deploy for very effective reasons within their organization space. Maybe looking at networks, maybe looking at endpoint devices, maybe looking at logs, but all those have silos within them, right? That you need to be able to pull the data from each of those silos and mesh that data together. Then you have unstructured incident response data that could be from a forensics analysis, like from a hard drive or a cell phone or something like that. Security appliances and IT systems is very similar to the vendor data, but these are more tailored towards what's internal, like your internal firewalls, or maybe it could also be your what do you call it, for access management, right? What are you using for your record management and your access management on that side of the house. And then there's log and forensics data that come back from every single event. Every single system is generating logs. Right now, each of our devices that we're using Zoom to talk to each other on is generating logs of who logged in, when, what time, how the connection was, did it drop, all those things. Those are, again, millions of records that an organization collects and generates per day. And then lastly, organizational silos, being able to say the HR team has different storage needs from the IT systems teams versus the security team versus the SOC team, right? They all have their own silos of where they put data, but that data needs to be intercorrelated sometimes, like in the case of an incident, to where you can say, okay, what happened on this system over here? Why did that get compromised and pwned? And what can we do to remediate it? And that's where Quillab steps in. So on the one left side, you have that data sources. Quillab steps in as an aggregator of all that intelligence, that data. And that is a data management platform. That's what Quillab essentially is. It's a data analytics engine as well, but it also serves as a curated output platform for that data. And that's where we take all those different things like the case management, risk matrix, kill chain analysis that we went through before, data enrichment, threat intelligence, all those different data points, keep them, store them, track them, manage them, visualize them, and then report on them and push it out in that content that you see on the third part, which is on the far right, the curated output. Whether that's business intelligence documents from an intelligence standpoint that you need to communicate up the chain for the severity impact, right, of a given attack or attacker, or potential for the severity, right, to risk assessments on systems and teams and people, to compliance validation, whether or not this is patched, that system is updated or whatever, sharing and collaboration, all of those components, right, together from your data to the processes that you run and use to do whatever it is that your organization needs to do from a cybersecurity standpoint, to the output that you generate. All those come together to answer the questions of how is my business impacted, right? How did it impact my team? How does it impact me as a person, as an individual, and what can I do about it? And the answer to what you can do about it is be proactive in your response by getting together the systems in place that will help you kill the Phish more effectively.
I think there's a bunch of things that you laid out in this in this, and one thing that I wanted to kind of throw out real quick, you have the silo here, you have a silo here, then you overlaid the geopolitical piece of it. And for most of us, no matter where we're sitting in the chairs that we're sitting, the geopolitical doesn't affect our world really until there's something that the reasoning behind it. So we're not even looking there as the possible cause. And as a result, you had the silos become some of the challenges. And we saw that in some of the questions coming in where, hey, we need to be able to communicate across agencies. Good grief. Sometimes you can't even communicate within your agency, right?
That's exactly right.
Within the silos. So it's being able to effectively identify through that rabbit trail that you painted of where is it hitting these different silos and who should care within those silos, because the remediation component of that may be coming from a different place than where it originated from, right? So you have to have the coordinated effort. And that's why I really, first of all, I really appreciate your insight on this. And we're going to get to, we're going to get to some questions now that make sure we hit the questions that we had in the original part. But when you start to look at how complex that is, it can get overwhelming really fast. And when it's such a simple problem that starts it, the complexities of what happens after it happens, and the remediation can be a real challenge for organizations. And I think your guys' ability, and others too, like you said, there's other folks that have these, and you mentioned Splunk and all those, because a lot of folks here will have that as part of their toolkit. But you guys aggregate that and give us an idea for everybody here, the difference between a team, a reasonable team of folks that are operating without a tool, how long it takes to be able to follow those rabbit trails, the ones they can see, to your point, Stephanie. How long does it take to find the ones you can see versus the ones doing an automated, like a side-by-side comparison? I know you have some of those in your toolbox in history.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's use the two companies I was just talking about earlier, because they both had decent security teams and decent tools in place, like their internal security controls. They had SIEMs, they had EDRs in place, and all the good things that they should have had. But the difference was that one team had access to the Collab platform, or not just our platform, like, again, there's others out there, but they had access to our a platform that could fuse and analyze and look at all these different data sources immediately, versus the other team that did not have that access. The reality was that other team never was able to get access, and they were never able to identify the problem until they couldn't access the systems. So they didn't even know it was a problem, right? That's that's what we're facing here. It would have taken them so long to notice and come up with an action plan to go against it, simply because they were so blindsided by not having access to the data and the information. Whereas the other team and the other company, yes, is an effective attack, but they're able to remediate, again, interact with different parties and organization, collaborate to be able to come up with an effective strategy of saying there's a vulnerability, let's leverage that vulnerability, let's decrypt our systems, get our data back. And they were able to do that within a day. That's the impressive thing, right?
So days, weeks versus days, what I just heard?
So if they didn't have that, it would have been impossible. If they didn't have all those different fusion points and the ability to bring in and look at all that data. Right. So having that data, having access to their systems, and be able to marry that up, and then have a partner network that they could go out to and say, has anybody else seen this? Please help us. Oh my God, we're on our knees begging. And then go, oh yeah, we've seen that, we've seen that, we've seen that. That's where that private public partnership came into play as well, right? And that's what we're talking about here. That's short circuiting it from weeks, literally, to hours down to on the remediation side, to be able to get back into business and to negate the attacker. On the flip side of that is too, we've helped other customers who, we deployed out Collab and they started using it inside their team. And their analysis went from literally days from, here we have an incident, we were compromised by this piece of malware, we remediated it, we cleaned these systems, got them back to normal, and then we have to create this PowerPoint presentation or PDF or whatever it is that we're going to send up to the staff to let them know what we did and what happened. And oh, by the way, this is why we're asking for these new funds. They did that process. It took them over a week. With Collab, he was done in 30 minutes. So he took he had just done that. And then they bought Collab. And then he went through, he's like, I'm going to take the same data, I'm going to pump it into Collab, and I'm going to say, how long will it take me to get this data, create a case, click publish.
And that's just the reporting part, right? So that's just so that
no,
you
that's
can,
the aggregating, interacting, baking
All
the
of it.
data together all in one. And that was in 30 minutes.
And Collab found things they never found their first round.
That's correct.
So all those little IP addresses down at the bottom,
Well,
they
we
missed some
pointed
during
them to
their
people who
analysis.
found stuff. We pointed to Mandy that found things that they never found before. That's correct.
and I think that's the biggest takeaway for me from this is that when you have a tool, the tools are going to continue to evolve too, right? So the tools are evolving. Certainly the bad guys are evolving. They're continuing to come up with different ways to be able to get you to click on that freaking link so that, and some of them are really, really good. Some of them are really good. So you have to be real careful, and even being able to bypass most of, even somebody that's really into this world can fall victim because it looks and smells, to your point, the spear phishing side that we're talking about phishing, but it gets more and more advanced. So we do have, if you have any questions, we can post those. I want to make sure we get you guys out of here, but supplemental resources is also included. You don't have to write down all those links. Just grab the PDF and click on them. They're all legitimate links that aren't going to take you to a place that's fishified, right?
That is correct.
Right. And what we're going to do now, if you want to continue the conversation, if you have something specific that you want, here's where we do it. If you have trouble meeting the presidential memorandum, oh, by the way, there is a memorandum for doing this within your agency and being able to fix things, right? Discuss the current issue. How do you automate your kill chain? Combining tools, all those kind of things into a single pane of glass. That's that dashboard piece that you were talking about. Or discuss something else, we'll do that. And if you have any additional questions for Stephanie, it's smiller@btechnologyinc.com. And I said in earlier, you don't have to buy from any particular vendor. However, if you would like to, B Technology is a woman-owned small business. That's your gig, right, Stephanie?
It definitely is.
Definitely is. And you guys are Hub Zone too? Is that what I say?
Yes, we're Hub Zone
wow.
and WOSB.
I don't know any of the agencies that don't have issues with being able to meet Hub Zone, especially in professional services like that. Fantastic. Appreciate that. And if you need anything else, so what you will have today, you'll have at the end of the day, you'll have the briefing presentation, a link to the session docs that you already have through here, but you have a link to the video as well. And one-on-one meetings, if you want to get together with Stephanie and Daniel, they'll be able to take care of that. And we'll get you guys out of here. We are on the mark at the hour. So any additional questions? I want to go back to a couple of things. First of all, Linda says, thank you. You are welcome, Linda. You are absolutely. Valerie says, thank you. Great presentation. So I know it was all Stephanie involved in that great presentation.
It's all me.
It's all Stephanie. But yeah, we appreciate that. And any additional questions or anything else you need, I can reach out there. I want to go back to, I'm going to keep this paused, but I'm going to go back to the original one. Because there was one question that I saw, or that I recall. I want to make sure we hit that for how can I ensure Cecilia, how can I ensure that I'm not tricked by pseudo sites? I know we talked about the back end, but that's a front end kind of question. You have any answers for that, Daniel or Stephanie? How do you ensure that you're not tricked? Because the sites are getting better and better, right?
How do you ensure that you're not tricked?
You're not tricked.
Honestly, it sucks to say this, just be very vigilant in reading them. So all of us are guilty of just clicking and be like, okay, yeah, boom, and click and go. They're getting really, really good at, so I got a phishing, I use Chase Bank for my banking. And I had a couple weeks ago, I got an email from what I thought was Chase Bank, and I almost clicked on the link, but the link looked a little bit off, it was a little wonky, but the email itself, the body, the title, the letterhead the graphics and everything, it looked exactly like what I get every freaking month from my bank. I'm like, okay, so that's a little bit weird. And so I actually dropped it. In my case, I have the luxury of dropping it into Quillab. You could also drop in that link that I sent for Google, right? The safe search.
Yeah.
And
Can
boom,
you,
sure enough, it popped up as a known phishing attack. I'm like, well, I almost got had, right? So it's just being vigilant.
and you're in the world, dude.
I'm in the
Sure
world, so
were.
I
Yeah,
can almost get comfort. That's my point. Like
it goes back to the human training, you know, some of the things that she had mentioned were like from UPS or FedEx. I am constantly getting texts that my PayPal account has been compromised or my Amazon account has been compromised. It's training. I don't click those links. I will turn around and log separately into my Amazon account
Right.
because if something's wrong, it will
Right.
tell me there.
That's right.
You know, you have to kind of train yourself to ignore those links and go directly to the source.
Yep.
If someone's telling you, hey, this got charged on your Amazon account, or this just happened, go log into your Amazon account. Don't click the link.
Yeah, that's, and then
Major training.
it's hard sometimes. And these things don't make it any easier, right? Because a lot of times, well, for me, used to be, I would hover, I wouldn't click, but I'd hover over to see if the link was actually taking you to a legitimate, hey, chase.com. It's going to say chase.com.
correct.
Not chase.com / something else or something else / chase. It's not going to do that. So you're just those little things. But at the end of the day, it's really, really hard, even when you know, and from this bad boy, if you open the email, they know you opened it on here. I have all kind of blocking on my Outlook so they can't track and stuff like that. And I know the Govies do too. They got a ton of that stuff, right? But at the end of the day, it's still, it's you just got to, be very
vigilant.
Yeah.
vigilant and suspect, right? You want to actually have them prove it to you, almost prove it to you. To your point, Stephanie, go to the source.
And
Yeah.
And Dave, if I could piggyback on that too, one final point is that if you do click on that, reach out for help. Don't be like, oh, I closed the email, I deleted it, I'm good to go. I mean, that's the worst thing you can do too, as part of the training. Inform somebody, inform your IT sysadmins, inform whoever it is that takes care of your security, right? Even if at the risk of looking stupid for having done it, look, it happens to all of us. I almost clicked on it. I guarantee you they're going to get me one day. And it's no longer about a pride issue. It's about a coming together community issue of
oh my
like,
goodness,
we have to support each other on this.
How important is that? So here's, ladies and gentlemen, you have the man, and I won't tell you which agencies he's worked with because they don't even exist. So now you know. But the idea is, here you have somebody who's living in this space, and Linda said it made the mistake with McAfee getting their PayPal stuff, right? So hey, Linda, you're not alone. Every one of us has done these things. And to your point, Daniel, one of the key things in the training, if there's anything you take away, tell somebody that you did it and say, listen, I jacked it up, or just say, hey, I don't even know if it's real. I don't know if it's wrong, but I did it. Check. Can you help me make sure I didn't screw something up for me or anybody else? And that would great
reach out to
advice.
someone you know. Don't worry about, oh, I'm going to bother someone. I know people that this aunt or that cousin ended up paying $10,000 because of this.
Yep.
And they're like, why didn't you call me? Don't, call someone call your neighbor.
Yeah, call someone. And you got the guys right here. If you have a question, I know if they shoot you an email and say, Daniel, what should I do? You're going to say, talk to your IT guy or talk to your IT person, right?
That's exactly right.
Don't click the link.
Don't click the link. And if you did click the link, okay, we'll make sure that things are going. All right, fantastic. Well, guys, I really appreciate your time. Thanks for helping with this. It is a huge issue. There's no end in sight. And I love what you guys are doing. The more I learn, the more I like about it. And I don't have a skin in the game in that. So good stuff for you guys. I really appreciate it. Thanks
Thank
much,
you, Dave.
Daniel. And
Absolutely.
thanks,
Thank
Stephanie. You
Thanks,
guys are awesome.
Thank you
Thanks
all.
much.
Thanks for joining.
Thank you.